Hi, friends. Welcome to Adobe Live. And today we're exploring Motion Monday video editing. So we have here with us Angie Dubois, a cinematographer and video editor. Hi, Angie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about where you're joining us from. And also on the chat, let us know where y'all are joining us from. And what is your project today, Angie?
Yeah, so I am a cinematographer and editor located in the Bay Area. I just moved here. I'm originally from the East Coast. I moved here from Maine like 3 months ago. So, new area for me. Really enjoying it so far. And I have done a lot of cool things here so far, and one of them we'll be going over today. I shot a music video for a local artist here in San Francisco. Um, and this music video that we'll be going over shows a lot of emotion, a lot of kind of negative emotion, and then you see some relief and yeah. We'll be
That's
talk
awesome. We can't wait for you to take us through the workflow. Sorry to cut you there.
No, that's
Um, a quick run of show for everybody. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, do keep up with our YouTube channel where we showcase so many streams like this. You can restream and you can see all of your favorite artists showcase their workflows, just like Angie's going to be doing here today. Remember to jump on the chat. This is live, folks. So a quick Q&A is we're going to answer as we go. So definitely drop in, ask your questions, and I'll be asking Angie along the way. So Angie, where are we gonna get started in Adobe Premiere?
Yes, we'll be in Premiere, kind of focusing first on some color for the music video. I used two different cameras for this shoot. So I used a Sony A7 III for kind of underwater water level shots, and then a red Komodo for the other kind of stuff. And I know
Mhm.
it can be kind of tricky to mess with two different cameras when you're coloring, so we'll kind of go over that a little bit.
Yeah, an A7 III, very much kind of like at the starting point, and then that sounds complicated to combine together, is it?
Yeah, they're actually Red and Sony kind of
Yeah.
are easier to match rather than I
Mm.
usually shoot Black Magic and that can be more difficult to match with Sony footage.
Oh,
But where
interesting.
this, yeah, it's just the water shots though, so it's not too much intertwining.
Yeah, and I do think sometimes maybe not matching them exactly gives a different vibe as
Yeah,
well, right? Cool.
yeah,
Cool. So let's get started and explore Adobe Premiere.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, So for this project, I was given a little bit of inspo for what they wanted. You know, clients or artists don't usually know exactly what they want, and I think that's okay. I think that's kind of our job is to like ask them enough questions to figure out what direction to go in. And with this artist, she likes the film vibe and that kind of look, but was like, but I don't think that I want that for this. And her inspo was Lana Del Rey and a bunch of artists that kind of have more of like a filmy look, more like faded, not super sharp.
Mm.
Um, so I like to use a plugin called Film Convert. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's been around for a long time. I've been using it for a long time, and now I use it a little bit less. I use it more as like subtle little adjustments rather than coloring all my footage. Um, but as you'll see here, so this is what the colored footage looks like, although I could make a couple extra tweaks. And then this is before the coloring. I didn't shoot in log for this because in order to shoot on the A7 III, I had to shoot in 1080 in order to shoot in 120 frames per second.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah,
challenging.
it is, but
Yeah.
I think it looks great. And the export is in 1080, so it's fine. So I use adjustment layers and I try to stay very organized when I am using my timeline. As you can see here, usually I have more of an organized takeout section, but I kind of like to look at the footage with some color on it already. So I like scrolling through here rather than going to the bins and watching there.
Mm.
Um, and I like to color each sequence. So I color my I label with color the adjustment layers and the footage. So here, the teal color, we have all the water shots on the Sony. And then in my timeline, you'll notice now everything is teal here. That way I'm not accidentally messing with settings in one of the adjustment layers that's actually for the other footage. Um, so let's walk through kind of how to achieve this kind of color for this shot first.
I love that you're
So
using labeling, by the way. It is
yeah,
so interesting because everyone uses it differently, either for like
yeah.
labeling the camera or labeling the category, like the shot list category.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I think labels are very important because, again, like there have been so many times where if these weren't labeled, I wouldn't know what this was, and I'd be like adjusting settings in here and then be like, this is not the right adjustment layer for that. Um,
Yeah.
and it can kind of mess things up. So I do label them and I can show from scratch how I go through this. So just take an adjustment layer. This one is set for 1080. Um, and then just start, usually I would start with a LUT, like just your base LUT, which the purple is the base LUT for the red Komodo. I won't be using that for the Sony footage, but usually I have that and then I just lock it off.
Was
So
this a lot that you downloaded? Is it
it
one that you
is.
made? Okay.
So it's just like the base correction for
Mm.
um like Rec 709 LUT essentially for the Komodo there. And every camera has a different Rec 709 LUT or different
Mhm.
correction LUT that if you like here there are a lot of there's the Alexa. Actually for Blackmagic I often use the Alexa Rec 709 because it matches better than the Blackmagic one.
Yeah, it looks different.
Yeah. But for this, we'll just start with some basic changes to the original clip. Um, so I normally, a lot of people try to save the highlights and they go down to try to save those clouds. But I think
Mm.
I'm gonna kind of lean into that actually and have the clouds a little more overexposed because they're not really what we're focusing on. So I like to turn up the highlights and bring the shadows down. Um, I know some people like to mess with the whites and blacks, and some people will turn the blacks all the way down, but that's not, I don't like doing that because it often can turn, if you have the blacks too far down, it can make it look kind of purpley, and then it's just really obvious.
That you
And
edited.
especially,
Yeah.
yeah, especially for this where she doesn't want it super sharp, she kind of wants like more of a hazy look almost. We definitely don't want to do that. But so this is usually just where I start, absolute basic. Um, and then so I do
When you shoot the clip itself, do you go for an underexpose or an overexpose on your settings usually?
usually I would I mean I try to keep it pretty balanced, but with the underwater shots especially, it's really hard to kind of see what you're doing more than
Mm.
just shooting regular because it's inside of a
Yeah.
cage that you can barely see the screen and you sometimes have goggles on. So it's a little hard to tell for this, but usually I would rather be a little more underexposed than over because it is kind of hard to take those highlights back without having it all look too blended in together, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. I had a suspicion it was underexposed, but I wanted to confirm it because it is, I noticed for every camera could be a little bit different.
Yes, definitely. This also was around 7 p.m. So it was darker outside and that like that time of day the sun is quickly going down. Um, right before sunset. So it's definitely more challenging to keep it at the right exposure around that time. And it's really hard to mess with the settings when the camera's in an underwater housing. So kind
I can
of,
imagine.
yeah, with this stuff, just working with what we got. Um, but
Did you shoot these in San Francisco or?
I did, yeah,
Oh,
at
okay.
Baker Beach.
Nice.
tip for anyone in the Bay Area, because I know Ocean Beach is a very popular beach, but the waves there are very intense, and that's why there's a lot of surfers. So it's not
Mhm.
great for
Mm.
shooting underwater. You'll just get thrashed around. So
Yeah, I imagine.
very basic edits in the beginning. This is the difference, just to kind of bring some of those colors back in the beginning. And then, oh, so right away I would rename this. I don't usually label them the colors until the end, but I would rename this just like basic, just so I know that that's what that is and it's not something else.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I can
It's
come back to this.
so much organization is almost necessary.
It really is, yeah.
You can't really avoid it. We have Alex Hogg in the chats saying hi, Sin. Hi, Angie. We have some
Hi.
folks from Atlanta, Georgia. So
Oh,
hopefully we inspire them to go shoot in the water. You're inspiring me to go shoot in the water. I
yeah,
haven't
it's
done that in a
so
little
fun.
while.
It's really fun.
Hmm.
And the Atlantic is actually warmer, I think, than I don't know. I'm still learning about the waters here and everything, but I
Yeah,
come from Maine where it's very cold most of the time. But
right.
um so now we're gonna jump into Film Convert. So this is a plugin that you can get, Film Convert Nitrate. I originally got it because I really like the film look. And whoops, sorry. Back to sequence. I really like the film look, and I felt like Film Convert gives the most natural grain. When you want grain, it doesn't look like you added it in as much.
Mm.
Um, but it is important to step one, you choose your camera because this, as you can see, it's just what it throws in there. Not knowing what camera you chose, it's just default settings. So we're gonna choose our camera. I did shoot this on a red Komodo, and then we'll leave it there at the red gamma 3, fly, and again, just default settings for this camera. Let me show you what happens if you choose the wrong camera. It can look insane. Well, let's do black magic.
Yeah, that's also very common if you use the wrong LUT on the wrong camera.
Yeah,
Um, yes, it could be the same exact way. There's just
yeah,
we don't recognize how different our cameras are until you get to the post-editing factor of it.
yeah. It's so true. And there are certain cameras
Hmm.
that kind of have the same color science. Like Blackmagic actually matches really well with Ari Alexa's.
Hmm.
And certain things like that you'll find, but and that's why I use the Alexa LUT on Blackmagic footage usually, but you definitely don't want to use like a Sony LUT on Blackmagic footage or anything like that. So this is what happens when you choose the wrong camera. It is very intense and just definitely not the look that you're going for.
Yeah.
So it's very important to
And this
use,
is the moment where you, like, if you're a novice at this area, which is, like, we all kind of, there's so many tools here that we all are novices in some regard. Um, we look at this and we're like, oh my God, what did I do wrong? Uh,
yeah,
right. It's a little scary.
for sure.
Very subtle changes.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so within Film Convert, there's so many different things you can do, and this can look scary at first because it's like, what is all of this? Um, but I'll walk you through it a little bit. So there's certain different things you can choose here, and this is kind of like essentially choosing the LUT for it. There's different looks, like this is the Polaroid look, which I actually really like that look, but it's for a very specific mood. So here, here she's there's clearly a lot of emotion in this clip. Um, just like letting herself float through the water, and we're not really going for like a summery, fun Polaroid look. So I like to use the this one, FJ AST 100. Usually, and I know it looks a little intense now, but we're gonna kind of correct some things there. First, we don't really want this much grain, and the grain, so you can choose like the size of the grain, so that looks kind of insane, but it is a look that
Yeah.
some people might like. I'm actually gonna turn the size all the way down. strength all the way down and then come back to that after and see
Mm.
kind of what we want to do. So here you have your chroma and your luma for this. So the luma kind of, you can see what it's doing here all the way down. It's really softened things up all the way
I
up.
can see the clouds better on that one.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So already like without film convert, you can see it's kind of just like
Yes.
what I'm going for is subtle changes on the image and more like making her look more human and not dead. So,
Right. And it's a little bit flatter too, I noticed. Like it flattens the background to the subject, to the
yeah,
foreground.
so if you use the chroma, this is more like the color of it, and then the luma is more like texture and exposure and things like that. Um, so I like to keep both of these pretty subtle actually, because together they're pretty intense. Um,
Mm.
so Luma, I'll probably go to like 20%. Let's try that. Um, because I do like to use some of it, but like you were saying, when it's down, you see more of the clouds. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and again, the clouds aren't super important in this. But it is nice to not have a completely blown out background. And then for chroma, I don't want the image to be too, this is kind of giving like a pinkish vibe, and we don't want that too much. So we'll bring it down pretty low and then build from there, maybe 30%, 31. So now you can see it's very subtle difference. And I can show after too, like how to completely color with film convert, and using less of Lumetri. But I like to use more of Lumetri, less of film convert. Just use film convert as like a small base for subtle changes.
Mm, okay. I love, an extension to just changing the environment of Premiere, making it tailor it to to your own needs,
Yeah.
basically. So this film convert can be found under the effects panel. Is that what I'm saying here? Once you install
Yes.
it?
Yeah, you
Mm,
do have
okay.
to install it. It is a plugin, but once you can go to effects and just type in film convert, it's under film emulation and then under effect controls. So this is a little different of a workflow. When you're coloring, you're usually in Lumetri Color, but this will be under effect controls because it is a plugin.
It's
Um,
essentially an effect that is being
yeah,
installed. Yeah. Cool.
yeah. And there's
Mm,
so many settings in here, like you can mess with the shadows, midtones, highlights, your blanking on the word, your curves,
your curves.
and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
there's so many different things you can do.
I'm going to say a quick hi to folks who are joining us just now. So hi, Clint. Hi, Robert. Thank you for joining us. We're exploring the workflow in Adobe Premiere for color editing with Angie. So feel welcome to ask any questions along the way. And so
Yeah,
far,
hi
this
guys.
plugin is definitely something I'm going to be downloading.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, especially when you're, like I was saying, when you're trying to make footage look like film. This is the best thing that I've found because there are other ways to add grain, and you can go through the process of finding the right color, adding grain, and all that. But
Hmm.
this is a very faster way to achieve the look. And like I said before, the grain looks more real, like you shot film.
And you
But
add it to an adjustment layer, right? You don't add it directly to your clips.
right, yeah, I every change that I really do, I add an adjustment layer for it. Um, so like you'll see we'll get into color wheels and then there's some HSL stuff we'll get into and then maybe change some of the basic settings as well. So it's kind of just like building, like you're building a house, you have all these pieces. We're building the color of the footage and it's kind of just like adding to it.
Yeah, yeah. Clint says here, I just came to support. Thank you for that.
Oh, hi.
That's
Okay.
awesome.
So we're gonna add another adjustment layer.
Hmm.
So you can see I named that one Film Convert, so I know. And I usually will label it a different color Um, so I tend to have the same, not the same exact settings for my film convert, but the same film stock. So I kind of want it to be the same throughout. So we'll use the FJ AST 100 throughout all the clips and just edit it a little bit from there. This coloring that I'm doing on this clip is obviously not going to work the same for the whole project, um, as this is like water footage, and then the rest of it, every scene is so different. So the coloring is going to be very different for each one. Um, so we'll move on to curves and color wheels. So I used to mess with the curves a lot more, and now I just keep it very subtle. So I don't know if you've never messed with curves before, you can see like down here. Well, let me add another one and then that'll be easier to tell what's going on. So you can kind of see like this is bringing up highlights more, and you can get really whack with it. And like this is kind of what it looked like when I used the wrong film and film con or wrong camera and film convert.
Yeah, yeah, it did.
Um,
It's like a lot of um contrast, light
yeah,
contrast.
yeah. So I do very subtle touches with this because if you go too intense, it's complete like this is blown out. And then if you use the bottom one, so you can see that the bottom is kind of adjusting the bottom of the frame
Hmm.
more, and then the top one is adjusting more of the top of the frame. So I'm gonna have this one just like ever so slightly above the line at the top, and then ever
Those
so
subtle
slightly at the bottom.
changes.
Very
Hmm.
subtle. And then one in the middle. So this is kind of where the look she's going for, like not very contrasty, more faded a little bit. This
Right.
will help with that a lot.
Because
So
you have a brief that you're trying to emulate for your
yeah,
client.
exactly. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so again, very subtle because we're just gonna keep building after this. So I'm just gonna go very slightly down in the middle, and that is kind of just bringing up the or bringing down the highlights that are you see in the foreground more, so we can see more of the water, more of her face, and then fix some stuff from there. But I like to use curves just for very subtle things. I used to
Yeah.
kind of go all out with curves, and for a while that would be like all I did, which is kind of crazy, but
Not a bad place to start because it is a little bit more advanced than using the basics,
yeah,
but you're still targeting those highlights, midtones and shadows, but in a
yeah,
slightly more advanced way with more chances for control.
right. Yeah, what's interesting actually, I've noticed a lot of photographers that I work with now that try to do video, when they come to Premiere, all they do, or not all they do, but they're so used to adjusting blacks and whites in editing photo that in
Yeah.
Premiere they'll just, like I was saying before, they'll just take the blacks all the way and then like it just
That
it's hard to
that's
understand.
Yeah, it is. In fact, I am one of those people. I am a photographer first. So this does emulate a lot of the Lumetri. I mean, the Lumetri is very much modeled by Lightroom's editing tools. So I thought, okay, my workflow in Lightroom might be fit this one. But you're right, those shadows, that you got to treat them very carefully.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you get
definitely.
that weird gray tone that you can't get anywhere else but in video.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
no good.
especially we'll mess around a little bit with the HSL secondary
Mhm.
after this, and if your blacks are too sharp or your whites are too high, you'll start to notice that there are little spots that won't pick up great with the color, and I'll get to that after the color wheels. So again, I don't do too much in here. It kind of depends. Um, where this isn't raw footage, I am making slighter adjustments than I would if it were raw. But here, so you have your shadows, midtones, highlights. Um, so earlier we turned down the shadows and turned up the highlights in the basic correction. Here I like to sometimes play with the midtones. So You can see the midtones are, it's kind of affecting her face more. This is a little more intense, just to give you an idea. Um, so obviously we want to have her still have a nice skin color, and we really want to make her contrasted from the water. So I would use color wheels and HSL to kind of bring those things apart. Because if you, in basic correction, say you're like, oh, I want the color of the water to be colder, then you're like, maybe think your temperature needs to go down, but then it affects the whole image. And then it's kind of hard. Same with making it warmer. Then you have warm water.
Okay.
So unless I want to affect the entire image, then I don't mess with these too much, or if my color balance is off and I'm not in raw and can't adjust it in the raw settings, then yeah, I'll make it warmer and then adjust from there. Like that actually looks pretty nice, but there's so much manipulation I want to do to like her face in the water that I don't want the entire image to be warmer.
Okay.
So go
You
back
need
to color reels.
you will need to target just her skin color. Um, is that where you're going
Yeah,
at?
yeah. So because
So
I
we're
don't want
going
the
from like overall editing to like controlled editing.
yeah, exactly. So there's so much you can do here in the basic correction that will kind of manipulate the entire image itself.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
and same with like tint, it's making her and the water and the sky pink, and I just want to manipulate little details. So I don't want the sky to be orange and I don't want the water to be orange because I want her to stand out from those things, and not really blend into the background as much. So we'll just do midtones. Slightly, I'll make them a little warmer. Um, See how that looks. And it's all very, very small adjustments. I feel like color correcting is just a lot of trial and error, but then once you kind of have an idea of your flow, it's very small adjustments here and there. Like I would never have color all the way up here unless I was going for that kind of look where
hmm
sometimes people are like, "Oh, I want the whole thing to be purple," and there's different styles for sure.
Yeah, and I think you said it best earlier. You said subtle because we're going to build on it. And it
Yeah,
is like a building process. It's layering on top of layering. And then
yeah,
you get that
definitely.
result. But I do as like whenever I'm starting anything, I always push it all the lever all the way just to see like
Yeah,
what is the potential here. And
yeah,
then I step back. I'm like, okay, let's go subtle now.
yeah. It's also a great way to see the exact areas that it's affecting. So if you go very high, and then you can see like, okay, this is what I'm adjusting here, and whatever's like really red, that's probably what's being affected the most. And same with shadows. It's a good way to find your shadows and be like, okay, so those are the areas I can manipulate with this tool
Oh, it's a good
and things like that.
idea. Yeah, that's how you find, okay, these are my midtones, these are my shadows on
Yeah.
the color wheel.
Yeah, I
Good
think it's
idea.
a good way to do that. Instead of just making them super blown out or super dark. So again, just very small adjustments here. So midtones, and then I might even bring them up a tiny bit to brighten her a little bit. Um, and that's probably all I'm gonna do here. And so the thing about renaming these, like now I know I can just come back here and adjust the color wheels and um, curves at any time. So like the more you build, the more you can go back and be like, actually, this is affecting me in a way that I don't want it to, so I can go back and change it a little bit.
Yeah. Do you have any tips or advice on how you approach color editing to enhance the storytelling aspect? Because I know you have a really cool sequence going on here, and a lot of your work has a lot of emotion.
Yeah,
So I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
yeah. I actually recently saw a video that kind of described it the best way in like 6 seconds.
Mhm.
But I mean, if you look at um, footage that's really warm, you're kind of associating it with like happy, positive vibes, and footage that's really cold, you're kind of associating it with sad or some sort of like trouble going on. And it
Mhm.
kind of depends what the subject of the video is. So if you're doing a film, for example, think about films that just have like a colder tone. And I actually really like to use color almost as like a character. So sometimes if in the beginning there's a
Yeah.
problem and the character's like really sad, you can make it really cold. And then progressively, as they're finding themselves, you can make it warmer and warmer
Oh, I love
very
that.
subtly. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
good way to enhance emotion in a film or any
Yeah.
video. I do a lot of commercial work as well,
Hmm.
and it's all kind of the same. Like there's always a story, and some people, some brands just have a certain vibe too. I personally like kind of more the warmer, airy look rather than cold and sharp. Um, and I think that's just my preference. Some people are different. Like people who do gym videos, you probably don't want it to be too warm and too bright unless it's somebody doing gym stuff outside or like a runner. But people kind of like the colder, like grittier look for,
Grayscale. Yeah.
yeah.
It gives it, there's something about when you enter a gym, it usually feels that way, I suppose, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, there's concrete, there's all of these weights and things like that. So maybe trying to emulate that feeling. Um,
Yeah.
I would be
And
curious if you push it the other way though. Would that help you stand out as a creator potentially?
yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. And I am someone who is always trying to, I don't really love doing like what's trending and things like that. And I try to, it's good to have your own style.
Hmm.
And when you're kind of starting out, it's good to pull inspiration from other creators or filmmakers or things like that and notice what you admire in these videos and
Yeah.
maybe try to recreate it, but you need to find your own style
Eventually. Yeah.
eventually. Yeah, in order to stand out and be like, here's why you should hire me over other people. I offer this, and these are the ways that I work.
Yeah. And
That's,
it helps you have a discerning eye also because then you watch movies sort of with a new eye and you'll
yes.
notice that thing that you just mentioned of like slowly this character, the character's evolving. You're gonna brighten their outfit, their environment,
Yeah.
all of it. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
You'll never watch a film the same after that.
Never. I used to think that it would hurt my movie watching. Like I love getting lost in the story and the fantasy of it all. And maybe now the technical aspect is going to intervene with that experience. But actually, I think it's enriching my experience. Do you feel like
Yeah, I
it's the
definitely,
way?
it kind of depends because now I can't just watch like a comedy without being like, oh, this is shot so terribly.
Really?
Um,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I find that when I watch animation, I can just watch it like a normal person because I'm a cinematographer and
Yeah.
editor and I don't do animation, so I don't know as
Mm,
much about that world. Um, but
yeah.
yeah, I definitely know more now about motivation when people are like in the ways that they're shooting or the ways that they're coloring or the sound design, be,
Yeah.
things like that. There's a lot of motivation that you wouldn't see if you didn't really do this or study this. And that's really cool to pick up on certain moods and like why is the camera really tight on the person or why is there unconventional framing? It's usually for
Right.
discomfort.
Discomfort. Yeah, like tilted,
Yeah.
diagonally. Do you find yourself doing any of those edits in post-production, to enhance that storytelling, like
Yeah.
tilting, swimming, things like that?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes I'll do I'll do like a push in post rather than in camera.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's just like you think of it after and you're like, oh, what would be really add to this is like a slow push in or like a slow tilt to the side, making that uncomfort or that discomfort for the viewers. Um, so yeah, I definitely it's kind of like as you're playing around with the timeline, you're like you just have these ideas. And it's the same as when you're shooting. I am always like on set, like, oh, this looks really cool, let's try this, or I have an idea.
Yeah.
Um, different things like that.
Yeah, Clint here says, I've had that thought as well. I like to watch a movie twice. This is great advice, by the way. I like to watch a movie twice, once to get lost in it, and the next to break down the technical. That is
Mm,
great. Yeah, I've watched some movies and shows like trillion times just to get
yeah.
visit that moment and also see it from a technical perspective.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually why I like to watch movies in theaters first, so that I can't keep pausing it and like
Yeah,
rewinding it and be like, look at this shot.
that's
Like
true. Yeah.
actually watch the movie and be forced to just watch it through. I do love that advice. That is good.
Yeah.
Because you can get lost in all the technical aspects and then be like, what really happened in this film?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. That happens to me too.
yeah.
And
So let's talk about some HSL. This is kind of where I have a lot of
let's
fun. Um, because it allows you to manipulate certain area or certain colors. So here it's a little easier because her skin tone is the only really like orange thing in this image. So if I whoops, um,
yeah, the HSL gives you a little bit more of that focus control on a certain color palette. It can be
yeah,
a little, we're leveling up. This HSL can be
yes,
more intimidating than the
yeah.
previous two sections.
Yeah, this is definitely more intimidating because there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and we might see some of that, and I'll kind of explain how I troubleshoot them. So
Okay.
here you just have the dropper, just select her skin tone, but then up here is where you're gonna adjust the sections. So here, that's not her whole face, so it will only adjust that little part and you drag it to, so now we don't have any of her. So none of her face right now. If we stay right here, we will be able to manipulate. So we're going to go back and then you can actually spread these wider to get more of her skin.
More range. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you do
So
have that little check mark clicked on for this mode to be visible. I noticed that.
yeah, so
Mhm.
they all automatically are checked. So if I guess I've never even done it without them because I feel like this
You see
gives
when you
you.
pull it, the little check mark right beneath it turns on. Um,
Oh, the co yeah.
yes, you can
So
just manually turn it on as well.
oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yes. I actually like to have it off personally in some cases because I like to see the whole image and like I see this and I'm like not really sure what else I'm missing
Yes, I like it
until
this way. Hmm.
yeah. So here you can do the same thing. You can kind of adjust the range
Hmm.
of what you can manipulate.
Wow,
And I
it's
want to get.
wild. And it really is just getting her skin.
Yeah, and it's crazy. It looks like something a doctor would see, like some sort of X-ray or something.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Or at the
um,
airport.
yeah, it's really strange. But this really gives you a lot of creative freedom with coloring. So I'm gonna try to get as much as of her skin as possible without getting the water. Um, and there's certain things you can do. Sometimes the texture of skin is a little bit rougher, and you can kind of like this is a little intense, but um, it's
It's
a good
essentially
way.
creating a mask
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I'm gonna leave that down. But so now we have all this opportunity to adjust the color for that specific section. So we are just working with her face here, so nothing else will be changed. So before, when we were looking at the basic changes in Lumetri and going warmer, it was affecting the whole image, and now it's just her face. So this is intense, obviously, to show you where we're focusing on. So this is pretty cool. It's just changing skin tones. And then we'll do the same thing with the water after, because right now, after the subtle changes we've made so far, the water is not really looking like water that is very attractive. It looks a little brown. We want to make it more blue. But for now, we'll stay focused on her skin tone. Make this a little bigger.
And skin tone could be very tricky. Also, you can use the gosh, I forget what it's called. Oh, tilde on the keyboard if you click on that panel so we can see it full frame at any point.
Yeah, yes.
hmm Look at those
Um,
changes though. I can see the film influence. I work
yeah.
with film a lot, so I can definitely see
Oh,
that.
really?
It's
Yeah.
cool.
Um, so she has a little bit of red. We were in very cold water, so she obviously was getting cold, but we don't really want to see the red as much in her nose and
Mm.
um so I might go more over here to more of like a greener, yellower look. Um
Yeah, that's
if
so
we
interesting.
yeah, because
You're
if we go
correcting it.
yeah, exactly. And I do want her face to stand out from the water. So I mean, as is right now, her face looks great. She's beautiful, but I think don't want her to be blending in so much. We don't want it to be so red. So maybe like a little more green or yellow. And then over here, you can also adjust, make her darker, lighter. Um, so I might make like actually a tiny bit darker, I want to say. And then after you always want to be thinking about the next thing as well. Like, what am I going to do to the water? And you can do the water first if you wanted to, and then do her face, whichever way you want to do it.
It's
But like,
interesting how, in order to correct that redness, you went the opposite side of the wheel. So the red is there, and then I noticed you picked the greens, yellows, kind of like when you're putting makeup on, they have that rule
yeah,
as well, right? So
yeah,
that's so interesting to watch it in post production.
yeah. It really is like building anything. Like when you're putting makeup on, you're building a look to your face. When you're building a house, you have all these different layers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Foundation, and then you start styling, and then you get a chance to do the interior design. But first, you need a foundation. You need all the
yeah,
technical aspects,
yeah,
running plumbing, all the things. That's a good
definitely.
analogy. Actually, I think we can go pretty far with that one.
Yeah, it really is. It's just like building anything or creating anything. And that's why when people that build houses are like, "Oh, I'm not creative." I'm like, "Really? I couldn't build a house."
I
That's
would, yeah, I would, I would debate that. Hi, Talib. We have some new folks here. Talib on the chat. Hey, Keys, what's up? So happy to have y'all here on the chat. We're here with Angie,
Hi.
editing color, exploring the Lumetri color panel, which is so many things in there, actually. It's
There are
very,
so many things. It can
yeah,
definitely be intimidating, but that's
yeah.
why kind of breaking down like the key things that I use, because there's so many things you can use and you don't really need to use it all. And a
Do
lot of
you,
them work the same. Sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
Yeah, do you find I would be curious if there are any like common color grading mistakes that you think like you've come across um as you were learning that
Oh,
maybe our
yeah.
folks here can avoid.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's always tough to think back to when I
Definitely
was
that
learning.
that LUT thing that you showed us earlier.
Yeah, yeah. So if you're using the wrong LUT, again, I mean, I can show. So for here, we don't have a LUT. We were not shooting in RAW, and this is a Sony. Um, so if I put the Alexa LUT over this Sony footage, it looks really extreme, blown out, very
Gnarly.
contrasted. Yeah. So it's very important to use the correct LUT on footage. And you can always find the correct LUT that you should use. You can look it up online or um, there's different tricks too. Like I was saying with Blackmagic footage, I usually use the Alexa Rec 709 because it looks better.
Mhm.
Um, I actually go on Reddit a lot and read what people are saying there, and then you can try it out yourself and kind of compare the differences and make
Mm.
that call for yourself.
So it's
Don't
not a
listen.
matter of like what one lot fits all. It's not that at all.
Right. No. Yeah, and that is a mistake actually that I used to not understand LUTs at all and think, "Oh, I just need a Rec 709," but not
Hmm.
understanding each camera has its own look, so you need
Hmm.
the specific Rec 709 LUT for that camera.
Hmm.
Um, and again, each camera does have its own look. I find Sony's have a complete different look than Blackmagic. But obviously you're comparing different types of cameras as well, like a cinema camera versus a DSLR, for example. They're
Hmm.
very different looks. Um, I think also the blacks and whites that I was talking about, I definitely used to do that when I was starting out, just completely like turn up the blacks thinking, oh, I don't want it to be look faded when I export it, so let's just do this. Um,
Right, right. Yeah,
but
that's true. That's happened to
but
me before.
yeah, so there's actually I can show a little export tip for color
Yeah.
real quick while we're on
Yes,
the
please.
topic. Um, so I can't remember if I got this off of Adobe's website or maybe a Reddit thread, but so when you export footage in Premiere, sometimes, I mean, with any software that you use, you're gonna lose a little bit of that contrast, that color a little bit. And there's a pretty quick fix for Premiere if you when you're so this is your export tab, and then I have this thing called the QT gamma compensation, and it really just makes up
Mm.
for what you're losing in the export. Um, you can just look this up and download it for free. Again, I think it might be on Adobe's website. I can't quite remember. But it's just a lot that I put in when I'm exporting. I don't put it over my footage when I'm editing because it's not really what it's going to look like.
Hmm.
And I don't want to see it with that extra like contrast while I'm trying to color because then it won't be accurate.
So
Um,
it's just compensating for the exporting process, really.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That saved me so many headaches because I used
Mm.
to do so much
Interesting.
research, like, why am I losing just a little bit of contrast every time? And it's
Yeah.
just a normal thing that happens with every software. So,
Okay.
yeah, so it's nice that Premiere
That's a
has,
great tip.
yeah.
I've definitely
Um,
seen that little section to apply the LUT, and I'll unmark that because okay, I've already applied my LUT, but I see
yeah,
what that how that helps compensate for the exporting.
right. Yeah, it's definitely a game changer. Um, okay, so now let's get into the water, changing the watercolor. So again, we'll get our dropper, choose, and this is going to be interesting because the sky definitely has some blues in it as well. Um, so we're going to try to just select the water and not the sky as much.
Using the
Um,
HSL in the same
using the
way.
HSL, yeah,
Okay, cool.
kind of the
Becca's
same way.
asking, where do we watch the final music video at? I don't know what they're referring to. This one, this video sequence. If
Yeah,
there's a place.
probably this one. So we don't really have a date yet for when she wants to release the song, but it will be in the next month.
Mm,
So the final video I will post on my Vimeo. I'll post about it on my Instagram, and probably on my website.
yes.
So if you follow me on Instagram, it's just Angie Dubois underscore first and last name. You'll see updates there for sure. And
Awesome.
I think she'll want to post it maybe in like the next week or two. Um, it
Cool.
will not take me very long to finish. Right now, we don't really have the song is not completely finalized.
Mm.
Um, so she's still working on that, which obviously as an editor can make it a little tough to kind of be on standby and wait for the final and then make final touches. but that's like editing anything. There's always going to be changes
More
and
edits and things like that. Yeah.
yeah,
Um, so we've got Becca saying, this is super cool. We got new folks, Lauren Van, I can't pronounce your last name, Flarkin, but thank you for joining us. And then we got Keys. Okay, so Angie, Talib asked if you're a video editor, right? You're a cinematographer and also video editor, right?
video edit. Yeah, I do
Mhm.
both.
He does both.
I
Okay.
think in the beginning, you kind of, for a lot of people, it's kind of like a one-man show and you do both or everything.
Hmm.
And now I don't
Total
as
package.
often, yeah, I
Hmm.
don't as often shoot and edit a project. Sometimes I'll either edit or either shoot, which is really interesting how it's kind of evolved that way.
Do you find
Um,
it to be more comfortable or like less of a, you know, less weight, I guess? Or do you want to have like control over the whole process?
yeah, it's a little interesting. Sometimes, like, I think because I've handed off footage so many times and seen other people color my footage, and I'm like, oh, there's definitely things I would do differently. Or
Mm.
sometimes, I mean, realistically, a client will sometimes hire someone else because they're cheaper or something like that. So then it doesn't really, it's making your footage not look like it has your touch to it.
Yeah. Oh, that must hurt.
Yeah. So that can be hard, but um it's all good. Everyone has their own style, and it is kind of cool to see what other people do with your footage.
Yeah, that must be interesting too. And in a way, you have to remain organized, I imagine, also for to pass on all those clips to
Yeah,
somebody else.
definitely.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
Uma Korn says your timeline looks so pretty and organized on that note.
Thank you. Yeah, I think staying organized is very important. As I mentioned in the beginning, for those of you who weren't here, I like to color my clips and adjustment layers to be for each sequence. So I'll go back here and show like all the Sony footage that was in the water is all teal, kind of represents the water. Um, and then like this is the first thing we shot, so I just leave it at the regular blue that's default kind of. And then I made this pink because it's more of like a strawberry pinkish scene. And yeah, I like to color things, label them. Otherwise, I get really confused and I move things around, and then I'm like, where did that actually go? And then it's a
Yeah.
nightmare.
Is the person there on all the clips the musician also?
Yeah, so
Oh, cool.
um, yeah, I after this I can kind of like play what's in the video so far too.
Yeah.
This is her. Her name's Leah Woods, very talented musician. Um, and she is kind of acting in this as like showing the emotion of what the song really means. And what's interesting when you shoot a music video is you have to pull from the artist and be like, what is the story here? And like, what is the emotion behind it? And sometimes
Mm.
they're like, oh. And it makes them think, which is really cool and
Yeah.
probably helps their music. And
Right.
so it's really cool.
That must be
Um,
such an interesting process. You're welcome to come visit me here. I live in Austin, Texas, the
oh,
live
nice.
music capital of the world. Yeah, so there's so many cool musicians and there's just the lyrics are such a storytelling facet, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Some people skip that. They just have like a very repeated element, but everything I've ever listened to, I'm like, wow, there's so many narratives here.
Yeah, they're
Mhm.
definitely it like any song, really. There's always some sort of emotion. I think even songs without lyrics, really, like, and it's funny too, because you can
Hmm.
have a song that's really upbeat and sounds really happy, but it's actually a very sad song.
Yeah,
Um,
right. Those songs we would listen to maybe when we were younger and we just
yeah.
thought it was upbeat, but then you get older and you hear the lyrics.
Yeah, and you're like, wow, I listened to that? That
Yeah.
like, why was I allowed to do that?
Oh, yeah. And then there's those.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
funny.
okay, so back to the water real quick. This is kind of like this to me is like the most important part. If you're doing water
Okay.
shots, usually, especially if you're underwater, it usually looks all like green and hazy. So there's so much you can do to manipulate it. Um,
Mm.
so I want this water to be more teal, like look more like appealing water, not brown. So we selected our water for the most part. We might have to make some slight adjustments. Um, this might be an easier area to do. So again, people often just want to like turn it blue by temperature or like make it warmer by temperature. And I will probably use a little bit of the temperature, but since I know what color I want, I really want it to be like teal. It's easy to
Hmm.
just kind of like choose the color here. And now it's starting to kind of already have that. It's really starting
Yes.
to separate her from the water.
Yeah, I see that. You can also see a little bit more texture in the waves, I noticed once you
Yeah.
did that.
So sometimes with HSL it can be tricky. So you see here, or I'll just turn this on. So we're not really able to get into here. So that might be part of the texture thing is like, well, let's
Mm,
do an example of just choosing a tiny bit of the water and see what happens. Um,
interesting. Hey, what's
so
up, Peter? Joining us from Chicago.
hi,
Awesome.
Peter. Um,
Uh, let's see.
yes,
Keith is asking a question. I'm not sure if this was asked before, but because I'm 40 minutes late today. Hello. Angie, do you have requirement list for your shots? From your shots, like a requirement list, I imagine from the client. Things like raw footage format or color card calibration cards in each of your setups. That's a great question.
that is a great question. For this project, no. I think um, she didn't really have any notes on setup or to her it's kind of like, yeah, let's make a music video. And then once I started diving in and being like, okay, what's the emotion here? And then asking her certain things like, well, do you want movement in this shot? Like wondering, do I need a gimbal for this? Or do I want to be
Mm,
handheld or easy rig? Um, and then really understanding the emotion, like what kind of lighting do I need to create this emotion for her? Um, and she definitely she doesn't want any of the raw footage. I think a lot of people wouldn't know what to do with it.
yeah.
Unless they planned on handing it off to another editor down the road. I think it's good. Like, I know
Mm.
what needs to be done for what she wanted. Sometimes I do get clients that are very, very specific, and it's kind of nice sometimes, but a little confusing when they're saying things like, we want it in a certain frame rate that doesn't really make sense. And then I'm starting to be like, do they really
Yes.
know what they want?
Right,
Um,
right. I imagine the
so
commercial side of things is probably a little bit more demanding than a
definitely, yeah.
music video, which seems like you have more freedom to make those choices, the
Yeah,
technical choices.
for sure. And yeah, and it all depends like what's needed to create this video. And just knowing as the shooter. And also I like to shoot for the edit. So I like to shoot in RAW so that I can manipulate the color more. Like here, this is just completely raw. And then just with the base Rec 709 LUT. And then you can really build on top of that.
Mm.
Um, and
Yes,
just
I think Keys was also mentioning just on this in respect to having to match multiple cameras, and I think we were touching on that behind the scenes,
yeah.
just having to match those colors. I imagine that's the technical specs of when you're recording is plays a big role there.
Yeah. So before the shoot, I knew that I would be shooting Sony with the water footage.
Hmm.
Um, and I like to shoot with Black Magic a lot, but I was like, oh, c color or matching the color from a Sony to a Black Magic is pretty hard. Um, it's definitely doable. It's something I can do, but it's just easier to know like, oh, a red will work better here. I
Hmm.
could have used another Sony camera, but I really like the look of cinema cameras and Red and Black Magic. I love the look
Yeah.
the behind those. And the only reason I use Sony for this is because it's the camera that I have for my underwater housing.
Mm.
And sometimes budget just doesn't allow to rent everything. So In a perfect world, I would have used the same camera all the way through, but um, that just adds a lot of expense for the
Yeah.
project and
And putting, your most expensive camera underwater is probably
scary.
also a question that pops up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Um, yeah, so it's just better to go. I mean, better for this to have gone with a simpler setup. I mean, it's just one shot too in the water, and it looks pretty good
It
in
looks
my opinion.
beautiful. Can we see a full frame on that one?
Yeah.
I mean, when we started, it looked nice, but I can see it has such a calming color to it.
Yeah.
It is
S-
the emotion is very calming,
Yeah. So
introspective.
what's interesting is this is actually, as you watch the video, you'll learn this is actually like the end for her. So it is kind of like a calming emotion, where throughout the timeline it's more uncomfortable and
Restless.
just yeah.
And so that's kind of like the resolve you're saying
Yeah,
to the
so
story.
even it's in the beginning and it's kind of showing like here's what's to come for her. But it's hard to know as a viewer. Like there's just so much up for interpretation. Um,
Right, right. And that's always like the part where you work on so many elements, whether it's like adjusting the colors or adjusting what you said earlier, doing like
right.
a quick zoom or pan, and post editing that helps guide the viewer just a little bit closer to what you want the viewer to
Yeah,
feel.
definitely.
Otherwise, it's
Yeah.
like a gamble, really.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Um, so I feel at a pretty good place with this footage. And then you can go in and make subtle adjustments based on what there is now. But if we look, so without the watercolor, that's what it looks like. Um, and this might be like to some people look like an intense water change, but to me, I really like this look. It separates her a lot from the water, and really puts her above it rather than kind of blending in with it.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that your video footage, that video clip is such a good candidate for this. What you did, the separation of the warmth in her skin and then the blue
Yeah,
and the because there's just a lot of contrast there to begin with when you recorded it.
right.
Like there isn't a sunny sunset, which would have made
Yeah,
choosing her skin much harder because then that would have been warm as
definitely.
well.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's actually why I wanted to shoot this at 7 p.m. and not 7:30, or 8 now when the sun sets,
Mm.
because I was like, this is gonna be really hard to adjust the color. But also
Okay.
we weren't really going for a sunset look. It's more
Yeah.
just
Solemn, that emotion.
yeah, and I really wanted the blues in here. And then the rest of the video is a little warmer, but there's no water in it. But this does make it easier to color, whereas this next clip is more challenging because
It's
this
beautiful.
orange, she has this orange outfit on that,
Mm.
so it did make it hard to adjust the color of her skin, and the grass has some orange in there.
Yeah, right.
So with the with the HSL, it's if we are adjusting orange, we're kind of manipulating all the oranges going on. But there's some flexibility in there
Right.
with what I was showing with these guys. And same thing with the sky is kind of bluish, and I did that on purpose. So actually having this clip before this one helped me understand what I needed to do here to separate her from the background. So I'll take my adjustment off for the sky, and now you see like everything's kind of orange,
Right.
including the
Yeah.
sky. And I felt like it just wasn't separating her enough. So I added a little bit of blue, and I still am unsure about all of that, but so here, this clip, I wasn't necessarily trying to match it to the colors of this one, and that would be
Right.
really hard if I was, because there's no water in that one, there's no grass in this one.
Very
Um,
different light conditions, it seems like.
yeah, and they're different moods as well.
Mhm.
So She did want a warmer, more airy look, but the emotion is kind of like uncomfortable. She's being controlled. So that made it hard for me to make the decision on how to color it. And I would say, I mean, I feel like as an editor, you never feel like you're done. There's always little adjustments
Yeah.
you can make.
I
But
think
I
as
will
an
say,
artist, it never ends. There's so many
yeah,
ways.
yeah. So I will say for any artist or client that you're working for, like I said in the beginning, they're never going to know exactly what they want for color or many other things. So it's kind of up to you to decide. But when you're doing a
Hmm.
first pass on color, you don't want to spend too much time obsessing over little details because you could send it to the client and then they completely want something different. So if you're spending too much time making little adjustments that they won't even notice, then you're just wasting your time. So I feel like giving them a general idea of the color is okay, and then
Hmm.
making little changes that other people might notice. Um, because yeah, you just never know.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, because otherwise, I mean, they might not even know the difference. You're better off kind of giving them that feeling as opposed to like take part in the technical.
Right.
Um, so chat,
Yeah.
we have about 20 minutes left. So drop in your questions for Angie as we move along in the color editing process. Yeah, this has been super interesting already. We've learned about plugins. We've been learning about the different panels in the Lumetri Color from beginner to a little bit more advanced with the HSL. So um, stick around and ask questions as we continue to be live.
Yeah, please ask any questions. I'm happy to answer them. So somebody commented on the organized timeline earlier. So I just labeled these adjustment layers to match the label of the footage for the color. And I like to label my film convert a different color, just so it stands out and I know this is not Lumetri necessarily, it's a plugin. Um,
Okay.
and it's going to be the same kind of thing throughout, um, with smaller adjustments over the clips.
Right.
So here, this is interesting. I originally shot this clip. I'll um, with coming out of the grass right here, thinking that would be a good transition. So I'll just play that. But the beginning of it actually didn't work for me coming out of this water clip. So I made these tiny little transitions that very subtle, but for me help move the story along. It's not rendering
Mm,
great,
that
so you
sounds
can't.
sweet already.
It's playing back a little bit slow, but you can kind of see. So this is actually a different clip from a different take, and I use the coloring that's over the water footage, so that it really blends together, kind of.
Hmm.
And it's so quick that it's like confusing to the eye of what's going on, but sometimes that's what works best, is like just a quick little. So real quick, I'll just show kind of how to do these like really fast transitions
Hmm.
because I wasn't taking just the beginning of the clip and putting color over it. I actually um so under my effect controls, you can see I scaled in a tiny bit, like ever so slightly. Um or yeah, and then I added some blur to it. So without the blur, it was looking a little grainy with that color, which is fine. But the blur also adds to the confusion of like just whipping into the next scene kind of.
Yeah.
And I have this sped up a little bit. Um, I put it at 140 for speed, so it's much faster and just going into it faster because the original shot is very slow. coming up out of
Mm.
the thing, out of the green. So I made that faster and then added some keyframes in here. So I actually have it start all the way on the left side of the image and then quickly going all the way to the right. So we have it zoomed in. So um, let me actually show you
And
the
it's
original.
it's all in the effort to just blend those two scenes together seamlessly, right?
Right. Yeah, which can be very challenging, but so I'll show you kind of what the original looked like. And for me, that wasn't working coming out of the water scene. Um,
Hmm. It's not like submerging enough.
yeah, it
Oh,
just
okay.
they were very different colors. And instead of trying to match this entire new scene to that scene, I thought just, oh, a little quick transition would be good. Um, so this is what it looks like without the little transition. Oh, that might not have been enough time. It's just wasn't working for me. Very different.
I feel like the other one has more familiarity with the first clip.
Yeah,
Um, so it feels less like abrupt when you transition
right.
over.
Less
Hmm.
abrupt, exactly. It's kind of blending the two scenes together. Um, so that's just like a tiny little thing that can add a lot. Um, oops. So again, I'm just gonna take this color from the water scene and add it to this just um well now I'm all messed up because I so this is yeah, about where I had it. So match that there and then that clip underneath doesn't really matter, so just delete that. And then I did add a little bit of a cross dissolve, but just a tiny amount so you don't really notice. Because if you do too much, it can really be like
Very obvious.
very obvious and doesn't look great.
So instead of
Um,
like helping blend, it kind of stands out on its own, right? Like it's just too
yeah, it's like a very
attract.
quick,
Yeah.
um, and also adds to that. I really like creating that, like it's so fast you don't really know what's going on, but I think that's kind of what creates the transition into the next scene rather than before where it was just like very solid water to grass. I'm not really a big fan of just using cross dissolves or wipes or anything like that. I think creating something for the eye that like tricks them a little bit, um,
So
is good.
so like not the Star Wars look, the swipes and
Yeah,
the very apparent cross dissolves or things like that.
right. Yeah, I also often, so I'm always shooting for the edit. Even if I'm not the editor, I'll give
Mm.
editors options. So I shot a lot of transitions when I made the shot list, keeping transitions in mind. I'll play one of them real quick. So I had her whip her head back, and then in the next scene, even though we shot this scene the first day, I
Hmm.
had that in mind already, and I was like, you have to come back into it, and it creates a nice,
In camera transition.
right.
That's awesome. And it
And
goes with the
it's
song, with the impact of the song.
right, so right on the beat.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then there's another one here. I'll play this. So I had
Mm.
her,
Love it.
I mean, it's a very basic transition, just like covering the lens and coming out of it. But I like the way that she kind of flowed out of it rather than just like
Right.
a hand
Yeah,
in, hand
it
out.
made sense with the dance move that she's doing. But you had to keep that in mind in two separate locations, it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was difficult, but I think it worked pretty good. For this one, actually, I had to zoom in on her because it's really hard to get the exact framing. So this one is not scaled in at all. So we had to match this clip.
In
Um,
post-editing.
right. So I
Mm,
just scaled in a bit to match it.
okay.
Just a little, so that her chin was kind of in the same.
Do you ever use the comparison view
Yeah.
to, yeah.
Um, Sometimes.
Hmm.
I don't as often as I should, I think. I think it's a great tool for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Same. I
Um,
think not as often as I should, but it comes in
yeah,
handy when it comes in handy.
right. Definitely. Um, so yeah, that's just on transitions. And
Yeah, in camera transitions.
yeah, um, but when you don't have in-camera transitions and you need to do something like a little fast confusion transition, I sometimes on a shoot, I will kind of plan for that, being like, just in case we don't have anything to use as a transition, let's just get some like whips of what's going on around here. So over here, I have a
Mm.
little tab called transitions. It's a mess. It's not organized at all. But you can see I have some clips. There's a water scene that we could, none of this is
Mm.
colored yet, but like we could use that as a transition if we needed to. Here's all the grass. So this is what the grass shot actually
A lot
looks
of
like.
texture, I notice.
Yeah. But relevant to the scene that we're shooting.
Mm.
So this is what I took to make that quick little um transition out of the water. And then we just got so much water stuff just in case.
Oh, and you got a little sound there too. Some
Yeah. Yeah,
whoa.
you can tell it's in a cage.
Yeah, you can. I wonder if you can potentially correct that so it doesn't sound so hollow and still you
Probably.
can use it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some great audio features in Premiere now
Yeah.
that can definitely help with that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Thankfully for this music video, she does not do a lot of lip syncing.
Okay.
She really wanted it to be kind of like random all over the place shots for certain things. I mean, as me as a storyteller, I was like, wait, but we have to tell a story. It actually works pretty well. There's only one part that she actually added after, um, like day of shoot. She was like, I want to shoot this real quick, and it's some talking.
Don't buy me no flowers. It's
Um,
Mm.
that is completely like
I
untouched
love the
footage.
collaboration of like these two kind of they're two creatives, but I can see her point of view is very abstract. And then you're, guiding the storyline um
Right.
at the same
Yeah.
time. Hmm.
Because you see a lot of music videos that just look really pretty, which is great, but there's not a lot of emotion in it, not a lot of story, and I am more on like the narrative side, like filmmaker. Though I do a lot of commercial, I think there's a good blend of those two things coming together for a music video.
How did you manage how did you do the get into the industry for like commercials and music videos? They seem sort of fairly separate, or they is that like an easy segue?
They are separate. I think I've always loved music and I find a lot of emotion in music as it is, and I think commercial and music video are very separate. Music videos and narrative films are very similar, actually.
Mm.
So I in Maine, there's a lot of outdoor adventure in Maine. I don't know if you've ever been, but so I used to shoot a lot of like outdoor adventure, like mountain biking, skiing, swimming, things like that.
Mm.
And a lot of that kind of action that I've captured has helped me with music videos. Um, and so if I'll play this shot real quick, and you can see like the movement that I have in this shot. Um,
Take this through the motions. I'm canting for burning.
So that's the idea. A lot of motion. So I was shooting that with a gimbal, just kind of like
Mm,
slowly coming around. And there's a
going
lot
in
of
a circle.
commercial. Yeah, there's a lot of commercial work that I use a gimbal for, similar to that. Um, and it's all kind of similar, like commercials, weddings, films, music videos, they all have similarities where there's always a story to be told.
Right.
And it's kind of up to the filmmaker to sometimes find that story, tell that story, and it's all through the way you shoot it, the way you plan it, the way you edit it. And again, color grading. Um, you would hardly see a wedding video that's has really colder tones and very contrasty. They're mostly warmer and flowy and things like that because it's celebrating love and
Right.
happiness and things
Yes.
like that.
So those are the
Um,
emotions that call too, the editing
right,
too. Hmm.
right. Yeah.
The choreography is beautiful, by the way.
Yeah,
Was that
it's
part of their um perspective,
yeah.
their creativity, or
Yeah, so it's funny they would ask me for input on things like how does the dance look? And I'm like, I have no idea because I'm just focusing on the shot. Um,
yeah,
and though I'm always keeping the story in mind, it's more like the technical aspects, like how are we going to transition into this and like how are we going to color this to create a certain mood and things like that.
right, right, right. And
So
then that movement of the circle, I think that was a great choice because the person's behind them and it kind of created this really cool trick, but then you were almost unveiling them.
right,
And that's a subtle choice that just makes a big difference in showing off their
definitely.
choreography.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And
So
then
as we get close to wrapping up, if you want to show us from the beginning to end more or less how the
yeah,
the video goes and also um let us know some of the tips and tricks you want them to walk away with.
okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, we'll play it at half. So the beginning, we don't have the audio for this yet, so it might not make a lot of sense, but it'll be a poem that she's reading before the song. So I played
Beautiful.
that clip earlier, so I'll just kind of start at the end here and then how it transitions into the song.
Take this to the ocean. Take this to the sea. Wash me in desire. You've been wasting me. Take this through the motions. I'm canting for burning. I'm so pretty with this bitter feeling guilty, no fever. The drinking season's past. I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for you. It's strawberry dew, strawberry dew. I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for you. It's strawberry dew, strawberry dew. Take this to the ocean, take this to the sea. Wash out all the fire, and nobody's stopping it. Nobody's stopping it.
Sorry, I think.
Okay, I think I can still hear the music there.
Yeah.
I mean, I dig it. I like it.
I know. Yeah, it's having a little trouble right now. Okay. There
There
we
we
go.
go. All
Sorry
right.
about that. Yeah.
That's all right. That's all right, Angie. That was a beautiful music video. I'm pretty sure you're going to develop it into something really fantastic. So we can't wait to see the final product. Folks, on the chat. Thank you for being here. This has been so much fun. Angie, thank you for showing us your workflow. Keep up with Angie on her Instagram so that you can see the final result as she continues to collaborate on this music video. And stay ready for the next stream. We have lots of streams today on Motion Monday. Again, my name is Sin Lagos, and thank you, Angie, again. See
Thank
y'all
you
on the
so
next
much for
one.
having me. Thank you.